Legacy overhead, that's what he called me. I was halfway through updating a compliance audit sheet when the video feed crackled to life, and there he was. Tyler Prescott, 32 years old, teeth so white they probably glowed in the dark, hair styled like he'd just stepped out of a cologne commercial. The CEO introduced him as our new Chief Optimization Officer, which is corporate speak for the guy who fires people while smiling. "Hi, everyone," he said, flashing that practiced grin that probably worked wonders at networking events and absolutely nowhere else. "I'm here to help us move into the future, streamline, optimize, evolve." His eyes swept across the video grid, landing on each face like a predator sizing up a herd. When they found mine, they lingered. I felt it, that microscopic pause, that silent calculation. I'd seen it before. The look of someone who's already decided you're expendable before learning your name. I didn't flinch, didn't look away, just reached over and saved the document I'd been working on. A master compliance file that tracked every federal certification, every licensing renewal, every regulatory thread that kept this company from drowning in lawsuits and government shutdowns. I named it Birthday Party Recipes and backed it up to my personal cloud. Rachel Torres wasn't going down without a paper trail. Let me back up a bit because you need to understand something. I didn't stumble into compliance work. I chose it. 11 years ago, when this company was nothing but a handful of dreamers working out of a converted warehouse, I was the one who figured out we needed federal certification to sell our medical devices. I was the one who stayed up until 3 in the morning reading regulatory guidelines that would make a law professor weep. I was the one who built the compliance infrastructure from scratch, brick by bureaucratic brick. Back then, nobody wanted my job. It wasn't glamorous. There were no corner offices or stock options or TED Talks about disrupting the regulatory space. Just me, a stack of federal guidelines, and a stubborn refusal to let this company get shut down by an audit. The founder, Margaret Chen, used to call me her guardian angel. She'd stop by my desk with coffee, ask about my daughter, actually listen when I explained why we needed 6 weeks instead of 2 to process a certification renewal. She understood that compliance wasn't a cost center, it was the foundation. But Margaret retired last year, moved to Vermont to be closer to her grandkids, and when she left, she took something with her, that institutional respect for the people who kept the lights on without ever standing in the spotlight. Enter Tyler Prescott. The first week, he called a company-wide meeting. Open floor plan, everyone standing around like we were about to witness a magic trick. He pulled up a slide deck filled with buzzwords: agile compliance ecosystem, decentralized accountability, lean operational matrix. I watched 3 interns nod like they understood any of it. "Some of our team members," he said, pacing like a motivational speaker, "especially those with legacy responsibilities, will be reassessed to ensure alignment with our forward momentum." He looked right at me when he said, "legacy." I didn't say a word, just smiled. The kind of smile you give when someone steps on a landmine and hasn't heard the click yet. That night, I stayed late. Not because I had to, because I needed to think. The office was quiet, just the hum of the servers and the distant whir of the HVAC system. I sat at my desk and stared at the wall where I'd hung my certifications. Federal Compliance Officer, Licensed Regulatory Coordinator, Authorized Audit Liaison. 11 years of expertise, reduced to Tyler's dismissive phrase, legacy overhead. I pulled out my contract, the one I'd negotiated 5 years ago when a competitor tried to poach me. Margaret had insisted on including what she called my insurance clause. Section 8, Paragraph C. In the event of involuntary termination without proper offboarding procedures, all company-paid licensing responsibilities and regulatory certifications shall be considered void, and all credentials will be formally rescinded within 48 hours of contract nullification. It had seemed like paranoia at the time. Now it felt like prophecy. I printed a copy, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my bag. The next few weeks were a slow-motion dismantling. Tyler reassigned my inspection prep to a marketing coordinator named Brittany, who thought FDA stood for Federal Design Association. He moved my federal liaison duties to a junior analyst who'd been with the company for 8 months and still couldn't locate the compliance server. He scheduled me for role evolution workshops that were thinly veiled exit interviews. Through it all, I kept my head down, updated my files, backed up my databases, documented everything with timestamps and screenshots, stored in folders labeled PTA meeting notes and crock-pot recipes. But I wasn't just preparing for battle, I was processing grief. There's something they don't tell you about being pushed out of a job you've given everything to. It doesn't feel like anger, not at first. It feels like heartbreak, like watching someone you raised turn their back on you, like being told that everything you built, every late night, every crisis you solved, every disaster you prevented, none of it mattered. You were just a placeholder until someone younger and cheaper came along. I cried in my car one night, ugly crying, the kind where your whole body shakes and you can't catch your breath. I thought about my daughter, Emma, waiting for me at home. I thought about the mortgage and the health insurance and the retirement fund I'd been building for 15 years. I thought about how I was 44 years old and had spent over a decade becoming an expert in a field that apparently didn't matter anymore. That was the night I almost gave up. But then I thought about Margaret, about all the times she'd told me that the quiet ones were the strongest. The people who scream the loudest are usually the ones with the least to say, she'd said once, watching a competitor's CEO rant about innovation on CNBC. The real power is in the people who know where the bodies are buried. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and drove home. The next morning, I met Helen for coffee. Helen Rivera had been the company's original HR director, back when HR meant the person who orders cake for birthdays and makes sure nobody gets sued. She'd retired 3 years ago, but we'd stayed in touch. She was 72 now. With silver hair she refused to dye and reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain like a badge of honor. "They're trying to push you out," she said, not a question. She'd always been direct. It was one of the things I loved about her. Tyler called me legacy overhead in a meeting. Helen snorted. Tyler couldn't find his own office without a navigation app. She stirred her coffee slowly. "Do they know about Section 8? Nobody reads contracts anymore." She took a sip. "So what are you going to do?" I stared at my cup. "I don't know. Part of me wants to fight. Part of me wants to just walk away." Helen reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was papery, but her grip was firm. "Let me tell you something I learned after 40 years in HR. The best revenge isn't screaming or sabotage or dramatic confrontations. The best revenge is becoming so essential that when you leave, they finally understand what you were worth. But I am essential. They just don't see it. Then make them see it." Her eyes met mine. "Not by proving yourself, by removing yourself. You've been holding that company together with duct tape and federal certifications for a decade. What happens when you stop?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The termination came on a Tuesday. Tyler had scheduled it as a career evolution meeting, which was almost impressive in its cowardice. I walked into the conference room to find him flanked by 2 HR representatives who looked about 12 years old and a legal consultant who couldn't meet my eyes. "Rachel," Tyler said, gesturing to a chair like he was offering me a prize. "Thanks for meeting with us." I sat down, folded my hands, said nothing. "We've been evaluating our organizational structure," he continued, launching into what was clearly a rehearsed speech about efficiency and forward momentum and strategic realignment. I let him talk, watched his mouth move without really hearing the words. I was thinking about Emma's soccer game on Thursday, about the pot roast I'd planned to make this weekend, about how strange it was that the biggest moments of our lives often feel so ordinary while they're happening. "Effective immediately," Tyler concluded. "We appreciate your historical contributions to the company." Historical. Like I was a museum exhibit. The HR representative, a young woman whose nameplate read Tiffany, slid a folder across the table. "We'll need you to sign this termination agreement. It includes a standard non-disclosure clause and releases the company from any future claims." I opened the folder, read it slowly. When I reached the termination page, I pulled out my own pen, a silver fountain pen Margaret had given me on my 5-year anniversary, and signed my name in a single, steady stroke. "I'll need a printed copy," I said. Tyler blinked. "It's all digital. We can email you." Printed, Section 14, Paragraph B of the Employee Handbook. All termination documents must be provided in physical form upon request. Silence. Tiffany looked at the legal consultant. The legal consultant looked at his shoes. 4 minutes later, I walked out with my paper copy, my silver pen, and 11 years of memories packed into a cardboard box. But I also walked out with something they didn't know about. See, when I signed that termination form, I triggered Section 8, Paragraph C of my contract, the clause that Margaret and I had written together years ago as insurance against exactly this kind of corporate coup. Within 48 hours, every federal certification I held on behalf of the company would be automatically flagged for review. Every license renewal I'd shepherded through the bureaucracy would be frozen pending reauthorization. Every compliance credential tied to my name, and that was all of them, would be marked as orphaned in the federal database. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I wasn't deleting files or crashing systems or stealing data. I was simply leaving. And when I left, I took my expertise with me. The federal government doesn't care about forward momentum or strategic realignment. They care about one thing: who is the authorized compliance officer on record? And if that person is no longer employed and no proper transition has occurred, then the company is, in the eyes of the law, operating without authorization. Tyler didn't know that. None of them did. But they would learn. The first sign of trouble came on Thursday morning. I was at home, still in my pajamas, drinking coffee and watching Emma do her homework at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria, my former assistant. "The vendor portal is down. Something about expired credentials. Do you know anything?" I smiled and didn't reply. By noon, my phone was exploding. Texts from former colleagues, panicked emails from vendors, a voicemail from Tiffany in HR asking if I could clarify some authorization questions. I turned off my phone and took Emma to the park. We walked along the trail that wound through the oak trees, kicking through fallen leaves and talking about nothing in particular. Emma was 13, at that age, where she alternated between wanting to tell me everything and acting like I was the most embarrassing person on the planet. Today was a good day. She told me about a boy in her class who'd asked to borrow her pencil and then returned it with a note folded inside. "It just said hi," she said, rolling her eyes but trying not to smile. "That's adorable," I said. "It's stupid. Who communicates with paper notes? We have phones. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." She gave me that look, the one that said I was being incomprehensibly ancient, and I laughed. For the first time in weeks, I actually laughed. That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat on the back porch with a glass of wine and stared at the stars. My phone was still off. I didn't need to see what was happening. I already knew. The company was discovering, one system at a time, that legacy overhead was actually load-bearing. I turned my phone back on Friday morning. 147 unread messages, 23 missed calls, an email from the CEO's assistant with the subject line, "Urgent, please call immediately." I didn't call. Instead, I drove to the little coffee shop where Helen and I had met, ordered the biggest latte they sold, and watched through the window as the world went on without me. My phone buzzed, a text from Maria. "They tried to log into the FDA portal, got locked out. Tyler is losing his mind. The company can't ship the Q3 orders without recertification." I took a sip of my latte. Another text. "The board is asking questions. Someone finally read your contract." I smiled. The thing about compliance is that it's invisible until it isn't. Nobody notices the dam until it breaks. Nobody thanks the person who reinforced the foundation until the building starts to shake. Tyler had looked at my job and seen paperwork, bureaucracy, red tape. He'd seen an older woman doing unglamorous work and assumed she was redundant. He didn't understand that I wasn't filling out forms. I was holding the line. I was the reason inspectors walked away satisfied. I was the reason vendors trusted us with sensitive contracts. I was the reason the federal government saw us as a reliable partner instead of a liability. And now I was gone. The FDA audit was scheduled for Monday. I found out through the corporate grapevine, the network of former employees and sympathetic insiders who passed information like samizdat in a surveillance state. Maria texted me, "Random inspection Monday morning. Tyler tried to reschedule. They said no." A random inspection isn't really random. It happens within a window that the compliance officer, meaning me, has always carefully tracked and prepared for. I knew the inspection was coming. I'd been preparing for it for months. Tyler didn't know any of that. He'd reassigned all my prep work to Brittany from marketing, who probably thought FDA audits involved taste testing products. I spent the weekend with Emma. We baked cookies. We watched terrible movies. We talked about her future, about college and careers, and the kind of life she wanted to build. When she asked me about work, I told her the truth. I'm taking some time to figure out what's next. Are you sad? She asked. A little, but I'm also hopeful. Why? I thought about it for a moment. Because sometimes losing something makes you realize what you're really capable of. She nodded, like that made perfect sense. Maybe at 13 it did. Monday morning, I woke up early. I made coffee, read the news, checked my email, mostly recruiters and former colleagues offering support. Then, at precisely 9:00 a.m., I opened my laptop and watched. Not watched literally, of course. But I knew what was happening. 3 FDA inspectors would be walking into the lobby right about now. They would ask for the compliance officer on record. The receptionist would look confused. Someone would call Tyler. Tyler would panic. They couldn't proceed with the inspection without an authorized compliance officer present, and the only authorized compliance officer was currently sitting in her kitchen, drinking coffee and feeling absolutely nothing. No, that's not true. I felt something. I felt free. The call came at 11:47 a.m., not from Tyler, from Margaret. Rachel. Her voice was warm, like a blanket. How are you holding up? Margaret. I couldn't help smiling. I'm surprised you're calling. I've been following the situation. Helen's been keeping me updated. A pause. I'm proud of you. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't do anything. Exactly. You didn't burn the building down. You didn't sabotage anyone, you just walked away, and now they're realizing that walking away was all you needed to do. I wiped my eyes. They called me legacy overhead. I know, Helen told me. Her voice hardened slightly. Tyler Prescott is a symptom of a larger disease, the idea that experience is a liability, that loyalty is inefficiency, that the people who keep institutions running are somehow less valuable than the people who run them into the ground while talking about disruption. It still hurts. Of course it does. That's because you cared. That's what makes you different from people like Tyler. He's never cared about anything except his own career. And people like that, they always think they're invincible. Until they're not. We talked for another hour, about her grandchildren, about my plans, about the garden she was planting in Vermont. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The company's situation deteriorated rapidly over the next few days. The FDA inspection couldn't proceed without a certified compliance officer. The inspectors flagged the company for material non-compliance and scheduled a follow-up audit with expanded scope. The Q3 product shipment, already delayed, was now indefinitely frozen pending recertification. Vendors started demanding updated compliance documentation. When the company couldn't provide it, contracts were paused. Legal fees mounted as lawyers scrambled to understand what had happened and who was responsible, and through it all, Tyler sent increasingly desperate emails to my personal address. Rachel, we need to talk. Rachel, please call me. This is urgent. Rachel, I apologize if there was any miscommunication. We value your contributions and would like to discuss a consulting arrangement. I didn't respond to any of them. On Thursday, Helen forwarded me an email that had been circulating internally. Tyler had been reassigned to a special projects role pending a review of his leadership decisions. The board had hired an outside consultant to assess the damage and recommend remediation steps. The consultant's first recommendation: reach out to Rachel Torres. The meeting took place on a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after my termination. I walked into the same conference room where I'd been fired. But this time, I wasn't alone. I'd brought Helen, who had agreed to attend as my advisor. And I'd brought a folder of my own. Across the table sat the company's CEO, the general counsel, 2 board members, and a very subdued Tyler Prescott, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Rachel, the CEO began, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I nodded, said nothing. We've come to understand that there may have been some procedural oversights in your departure. We'd like to discuss a path forward. I'm listening. The general counsel slid a document across the table. We're prepared to offer you a consulting contract, 12 months, generous compensation, full benefits. Your role would be to oversee the recertification process and ensure a proper transition of your responsibilities. I glanced at the document. It was exactly what I expected. a corporate band-aid designed to stop the bleeding without actually addressing the wound. "No," I said. The room tensed. "I'm not coming back. Not as a consultant, not as an employee, not in any capacity. Rachel, please." The CEO leaned forward. "We're willing to be flexible. Name your terms." I looked at Tyler. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. "Mr. Prescott," I said, "do you know what Section 8, Paragraph C of my contract says?" He didn't answer. "It says that upon involuntary termination without proper offboarding, all my certifications are automatically flagged for review. Every license I held on behalf of this company is now frozen. The recertification process will take approximately 6 to 8 weeks, assuming you can find someone qualified to handle it." I opened my folder and slid a document across the table. This is a list of the 47 active certifications currently tied to my name. Every vendor contract, every federal authorization, every state license, all of them are now orphaned. The general counsel's face went pale. "I didn't sabotage anything," I continued. "I simply exercised the rights guaranteed in my contract. The same contract that HR apparently never read before they decided to terminate me in a conference room without proper documentation." Silence. "You called me legacy overhead," I said, looking directly at Tyler. "You thought I was dead weight, a relic, an obstacle to your forward momentum. But here's what you didn't understand. I wasn't overhead. I was the foundation, and you can't optimize a foundation. You can only remove it, and when you do, the building falls down." I stood up, gathered my folder, and headed for the door. Helen followed. "Rachel, wait!" The CEO's voice was strained. "Please, the company needs you." I paused at the doorway. "The company needed me 2 weeks ago. It needed me 5 years ago when I negotiated that contract. It needed me every single day for 11 years, while I kept it running without anyone noticing. But need isn't respect, and I'm done trading one for the other." I walked out. The weeks that followed were strange. I slept in. I cooked elaborate meals. I helped Emma with her homework and attended her soccer games, and had long conversations with Helen about life and work, and the complicated art of knowing your worth. Job offers started coming in almost immediately. Competitors who'd watched the situation unfold with barely concealed glee. Industry consultants who wanted to pick my brain about what had happened. A healthcare startup that wanted me to build their compliance infrastructure from scratch, the way I'd done 11 years ago. I said no to most of them. I wasn't ready to jump back in. Not yet. One evening, about a month after my departure, I received an unexpected visitor. Maria, my former assistant, showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and a nervous expression. "I hope this is okay," she said. I wanted to see how you were doing." We sat on my back porch and drank wine and watched the sunset. Maria told me about the chaos that had consumed the company since my departure. The board had hired a team of consultants to handle the recertification process. Tyler had been quietly transitioned out and was apparently exploring new opportunities, which is corporate speak for updating his LinkedIn while crying. "The worst part," Maria said, "is that nobody really understood what you did until you were gone. They thought compliance was just paperwork, just forms and deadlines and boring meetings." "It is paperwork," I said. "That's the point. It's unsexy and unglamorous and absolutely essential. It's the work that nobody wants to do until it's not being done." Maria nodded. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm sorry I didn't speak up when they were pushing you out. You couldn't have stopped it. I could have said something." I thought about that. The people who stay silent during injustice aren't the enemy. They're just scared. The enemy is the person who creates the fear in the first place. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Maria said, "What are you going to do now?" I looked up at the stars. "I've been thinking about starting something of my own, a consulting firm specializing in compliance infrastructure, help companies build the boring systems that keep them from falling apart." "That sounds perfect for you." "It does, doesn't it? Thank you for listening this far. I know this story is long, and I know there are 1,000 other things you could be doing with your time, but you're here, and that means something to me. because here's what I've learned. What I really want you to take away from all of this: your worth is not determined by how loudly you're acknowledged. It's determined by what falls apart when you're not there. If you've ever felt invisible in your work, if you've ever been dismissed as overhead or legacy or redundant, know this: the people who truly keep the world running are rarely the ones standing in the spotlight. They're the ones in the background, quietly holding everything together. And sooner or later, the spotlight breaks down. And when it does, everyone finally sees who was really doing the work. 3 months later, I signed the lease on my new office. It was a small space, just 2 rooms on the 4th floor of a building downtown, but it had good light and a coffee maker and a window that looked out over the park where Emma and I had walked on the day everything changed. Helen came to the ribbon cutting, if you could call it that. It was really just me, her, and Emma, standing in an empty room with a bottle of champagne and a pair of scissors. "To new beginnings," Helen said, raising her glass. "To knowing your worth," I added. Emma rolled her eyes. "To getting a real desk so I can do my homework here after school." We laughed. We drank. We talked about the future. The consulting firm grew slowly at first, then faster than I'd expected. It turns out there's a real market for compliance expertise, especially from someone who's seen what happens when it's ignored. I hired Maria 6 months in, then 2 more analysts, then a junior associate fresh out of regulatory law, and yes, I eventually heard what happened to Tyler Prescott. He landed at a smaller company, a medical device startup that was looking to disrupt the regulatory space. Within 8 months, they were facing their own FDA investigation. Last I heard, he was pursuing entrepreneurial opportunities, which probably meant he was day trading crypto and blaming cancel culture for his problems. I didn't celebrate his failure. I didn't gloat. I just noted it, the way you note a weather report about a storm that's no longer heading your way. Some nights, when Emma's asleep and the house is quiet, I think about those 11 years. The late nights. The crises averted, the systems built and maintained and protected, all that invisible work that nobody valued until it was gone. I don't regret any of it. It made me who I am. It taught me what I know. It gave me the tools to build something new, something that's truly mine. And that's the real revenge, isn't it? Not destruction. Not sabotage, not dramatic confrontations in conference rooms, just becoming so good at what you do that when you leave, they finally understand what they lost. Just walking away with your head high and your skills intact and your future wide open. Just proving, without saying a word, that you were never overhead. You were the foundation. Last week, Emma asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I thought about it for a moment. "Breakfast in bed," I said. "And a card. A real one, not digital." She made a face. "Paper? That's so ancient. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." She laughed and promised to think about it. And for a moment, I saw the future. Not the company's future or my business's future, but the future. Emma grown up, maybe running her own company someday, maybe facing her own Tyler Prescott. And if she does, I hope she remembers this story. I hope she remembers that the quiet ones are often the strongest. That expertise isn't overhead, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away and let gravity do the rest. I hope she remembers her mom, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, and watching a company learn, the hard way, what happens when you disrespect the foundation. And I hope she knows, in her bones, that she was always worth more than their words. Because if there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's this: the people who try to diminish you are usually afraid of how bright you shine. And the best response to that fear isn't fighting. It's shining even brighter. So if you're out there feeling undervalued, feeling invisible, feeling like all your hard work doesn't matter, I want you to know, it matters. You matter. And the day will come when everyone else finally sees what you've always known. You're not overhead. You're irreplaceable, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.